Deputy Ryan Callahan was on his midnight patrol through the frozen woods of Pine Valley when his headlights caught a sight that stopped his heart. A man lying in the snow, barely breathing, surrounded by 3 snarling German shepherds. Their fur was matted, their ribs showing, their eyes wild with fear and hunger. But when Ryan stepped closer, the dogs didn't attack. They stood guard. Ryan froze. It was Daniel Brooks, a federally wanted fugitive whose face had been on every wanted poster for months. Yet, something about the scene felt wrong. The man's wrists were bruised. The dogs bore marks of chains and burns. Victims, not monsters. What Ryan uncovered that night would unravel a web of betrayal, redemption, and a bond between man and beast that even death couldn't break. What happened next will make you cry and believe in miracles again. Before we start, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The storm had buried Pine Valley, Colorado, under a silence so heavy it felt sacred. Snow whirled through the mountain road in ghostly spirals, swallowing the sound of Deputy Ryan Callahan's patrol tires as his SUV crawled through the night. It was near midnight, temperature well below freezing, and the radio had long turned to static. Ryan, 35 years old, ex-Marine with the calm eyes of a man who had seen too much war, scanned the endless white. His storm-gray gaze was sharp, even in the dark. The Navy winter sheriff uniform hugged his tall, broad frame, and the gold badge on his chest caught faint reflections from the headlights. He was used to silence, but this kind of quiet was wrong. It was the kind that pressed against the ribs, as if the world itself were holding its breath. As the SUV climbed a curve along the ridge, his headlights swept across something that didn't belong. A dark patch in the snow, too large to be a branch, too still to be an animal. Ryan slowed the car, eyes narrowing. Then, with a knot of instinct tightening in his chest, he stopped and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit him like a slap. The wind bit his cheeks, carrying needles of snow that stung like glass. He pulled his collar up, switched on his flashlight, and moved carefully toward the dark shape half buried near the roadside ditch. The beam cut through the white swirl, then stopped dead. It was a man. He was sprawled on his back, face pale under a crust of snow, one arm twisted awkwardly under him. His coat was torn open across the chest and thigh. Blood soaked deep into the fabric, blooming against the white ground like red ink in paper. His lips were blue, his breath a thin rattle that came and went in shallow waves. Ryan's heart kicked hard. He knelt, brushing snow from the man's face. "Hey, can you hear me?" No answer, only a faint, broken sound. Then, from the corner of his eye, Ryan saw movement. 3 German shepherds stood in a loose circle around the body, motionless but coiled with tension. Their breath came in visible puffs of steam, their fur streaked with ice and matted blood. They weren't wandering nearby. They were already there, standing over the fallen man as if guarding what they had done. Ryan froze, the flashlight steady but low. The dog's eyes glinted in the beam, gold and sharp like embers in the snow. The biggest of the 3, a black and tan male with a torn left ear, growled deep in its chest, stepping half a pace forward. The other 2 mirrored him, one sable-coated and lean, the other younger and limping slightly on a front paw still bound with a broken chain. The sound of their growls vibrated through the air, blending with the wind. Ryan stayed perfectly still. He knew the stance, knew it from years of training K9 units. Shoulders forward, tails low, weight on the front legs. These weren't wild strays. They were trained dogs, running on adrenaline, hunger, and something. Darker. Confusion. The man's thigh wound was jagged, torn by teeth. Snow around him was churned and blood-specked. It was clear. They had attacked him, and now, even with him unconscious, they were defending the aftermath. Easy now. Ryan's voice was calm, barely above the howl of the storm. His breath fogged the air between them. "Nobody's gonna hurt you." The alpha shepherd's lips peeled back farther, revealing blood-streaked teeth. It took another step, snow crunching under its paws. The two others shifted, circling slightly, every motion tight, precise, like they'd done this before. Ryan slowly lifted his flashlight higher, letting the beam slide over their necks. What he saw made his stomach twist. Metal collars. Tight, rusted, digging into raw flesh. The skin beneath was scarred and scabbed, dark with old burns. One dog's fur had been singed away in patches. These animals had been chained, beaten, made into weapons. His pulse quickened. He didn't reach for his gun. Not yet. The man on the ground stirred faintly, letting out a hoarse groan. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His hand twitched weakly against the snow. Ryan could see frost forming on his lashes, blood caking along his wrist. "Hang on," Ryan whispered. "Don't move." The alpha shepherd snarled sharply at the sound, then barked once, loud and violent, the sound echoing through the forest. Ryan froze again. The dog's body trembled with rage, or fear, it was impossible to tell which. The other two answered with short, clipped growls, tails low but rigid. The wind howled louder, pushing snow sideways across the scene. Ryan's flashlight flickered in the blizzard. He tried to inch his foot forward, but the alpha snapped its jaws, the sound like a crack of dry wood. Ryan stopped immediately. The man coughed weakly, blood flecking the snow near his mouth. Ryan caught his words, barely a whisper through broken breath. "Don't let them take—" The rest vanished into the wind. Ryan's eyes flicked to the dogs again. Their stance hadn't changed, but something in their eyes had. Beneath the fury there was a flicker. Fear, desperation, even pain. "Yeah," Ryan murmured under his breath. "You're not the monsters here, are you?" He noticed now. Each of them had identical collar scars, identical bruises along the ribs. They'd come from the same place. Whoever had owned them hadn't cared whether they lived or died. Still, they were dangerous. Their muscles were coiled, their eyes fixed on him. The man on the ground gave another shudder, his chest rising weakly. His pulse was fading. Ryan took one slow step backward, letting his presence seem less aggressive. The alpha tracked him with its head, growl low but constant. Snow swirled violently between them, a white curtain drawn by the storm. The dogs stayed unmoving around the man, 3 shadows in the snow, scarred, trembling, and lost, and Ryan, standing in that freezing silence, realized he had stumbled into something far more complicated than an animal attack. The man was dying. The dogs were broken. And between them, in the middle of that endless white night, stood a truth no one yet understood. The wind had grown quieter, though the snow still fell in fine, relentless sheets. Deputy Ryan Callahan stood motionless, the beam of his flashlight trembling slightly as the storm hissed around him. The dying man's breath came in ragged bursts, steam ghosting into the night, while the 3 German shepherds circled, uncertain, half-mad with fear and exhaustion. Their growls had faded into low rumbles, more a warning than a threat. Ryan knew the look in their eyes, torn between instinct and obedience, the way animals trained to hurt sometimes waited for commands that would never come. He forced himself to breathe slowly. The smell of iron and wet fur hung in the cold. "Easy now," he murmured, voice low and steady. His gloved hand reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out the thick leather gloves he kept from his canine days. He flexed them once, then drew one off and tossed it into the snow between them. The alpha's gaze darted to the glove. Its lips twitched, but it didn't move. Ryan took another glove and threw it closer, letting it land just inches from the leader's paws. The dog hesitated, ears flicking forward, tail stiff. The smaller shepherd whimpered. The chain still hanging from its paw clinked faintly as it shifted. Ryan knew the signs: hunger, confusion, and frostbite. Their legs trembled, not just from aggression but from weakness. He took a step closer, moving slowly, his boots crunching into the snow. "You're freezing," he said softly. "You've done what you thought you had to do. Now, let me fix this." The alpha finally moved. It lowered its head and sniffed the glove, teeth brushing the leather, then looked back at Ryan as though waiting. Ryan kept his hand visible, palm outward. "That's right," he whispered. "You remember this, don't you?" He could see faint tattoo ink beneath the dog's collar. A series of numbers, faded but recognizable. Military issue. These were working dogs once, perhaps bred for federal use, and then discarded into something darker. The Alpha's body loosened slightly. Ryan crouched, slow and deliberate, until his knees pressed into the snow. He reached into his pocket and pulled a protein bar, tearing it open. He tossed half toward the dogs. The wind carried the scent of peanut and oats. The smallest shepherd limped forward, sniffed, and began to eat, tail tucked between its legs. The Alpha didn't stop it. That was enough. Ryan inched closer. When he finally reached the man, the dog stayed back, trembling but no longer lunging. The man's pulse was weaker than before. Ryan tore open a field dressing and pressed it to the gash on the thigh. The blood had slowed, congealing thick and dark. He tightened the bandage with a strip of gauze and wrapped his own scarf around it for compression. The man groaned faintly, his head rolling toward Ryan's hand. "Stay with me," Ryan muttered. "You're not dying out here." He looked up. The dogs had sat down and howled, the snow watching. Their bodies sagged, spent from the attack and the cold. Their breath came shallow and uneven. Ryan unclipped his radio, trying once more. The static was still bad, but this time he caught a faint signal. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Callahan. I have one male down, multiple injuries, animal involvement, requesting immediate medical response and animal control. North Ridge, half-mile past marker 19. Severe exposure. Do you copy?" The response broke through, faint but audible. "Copy that, Callahan. Paramedics en route, ETA 20 minutes. Keep the subject stable." Ryan sighed in relief, exhaling a plume of white. 20 minutes in this cold was an eternity. He looked down at the man. Blood on his hands, frost forming on his eyelashes, but still breathing. Ryan searched the man's coat for ID. Inside the inner pocket he found a wallet stiff with ice. He flipped it open. Name, Daniel Brooks. The name hit him with a strange familiarity. He'd seen it before. It took only a second for memory to snap into place. A federal wanted bulletin 3 weeks ago, circulated to local departments. Brooks, Daniel A., 42 years old, Caucasian male, armed and dangerous. Charges, interstate trafficking, assault, evading federal custody. Ryan's jaw tightened. A fugitive, bleeding in the snow, half-eaten by his own dogs. The situation was turning stranger by the minute. He radioed again. "Dispatch, run an ID, name Daniel Brooks, confirm federal status." The static hissed. Then a reply came, clearer this time. "Confirmed. Active warrant, federal. FBI case number 8814A. You want us to notify them?" Ryan stared at the unconscious man. "Yeah," he said quietly, "but tell them he's not going anywhere tonight." The smallest shepherd whimpered again, curling its body into the snow. Ryan looked over. The dog's fur had frozen stiff. Every breath rattled. Without thinking, he unzipped his coat and pulled out a thermal blanket from his emergency kit. He tore it into halves, tossing one section toward the dogs. The foil rustled. The Alpha stiffened, but didn't attack. Ryan spread the other half over the man's torso, pinning the edges down with snow. "All right," he whispered, mostly to himself. "Nobody dies out here tonight." Minutes passed. The storm softened to a steady fall, the kind that muffled everything. The world reduced to breathing, shivering, and the hiss of snow settling. The Alpha shepherd moved closer to the man now, sniffing his face, then licking his cheek once before curling beside him. The other two followed, huddling close to the dying body as if seeking warmth from him even now. Ryan stayed crouched nearby, his flashlight dimming. He couldn't help but study the tattoos burned into their ears, serial marks, each beginning with the letters MK. He had seen that prefix before in canine military registries. These dogs weren't random strays. Someone had trained them. For precision obedience, maybe for field operations. then dumped them, or worse. The wail of a distant siren broke the stillness, faint, carried on the wind, but getting closer. Ryan rose to his feet, signaling with his flashlight toward the road. Within minutes, headlights glowed through the storm. A county ambulance and an animal control truck slid into view. Two figures stepped out. The first was Dr. Evelyn Hart, 48, the county's mobile veterinarian. A short woman with auburn-gray hair tucked under a knit cap, she wore a padded parka over jeans and knee-high insulated boots, her face half hidden behind a wool scarf. Her hands, though gloved, moved with a calm precision that came from years of handling both frightened dogs and frightened owners. The second was Officer Tom Alvarez, 30, animal control deputy. Lanky and fair-haired, his uniform layered under a heavy brown jacket. He looked tense, holding a tranquilizer rifle at his side. Evelyn approached first, squinting through the flurries. "You sure it's safe to get close?" Ryan nodded. "They're cold, hungry, and scared, but they're done fighting. For now." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Those the same dogs that tore that man up?" "Yeah," Ryan said, glancing at the motionless figure on the ground. "And they're probably the reason he's still alive. They didn't leave him." Evelyn crouched beside the man. "Pulse?" "Barely," Ryan said. "Tourniquet on the thigh, frostbite on the fingers. We'll lose him if we don't move fast." Evelyn's eyes flicked to the dogs. "And them?" Ryan knelt near the Alpha again. "They need care too. They've been chained and beaten, maybe used for illegal work. You can see the burns." Tom hesitated. "You want me to trank them?" Ryan shook his head. "No need. They'll follow him." He wasn't wrong. When the paramedics loaded Daniel Brooks onto the stretcher, the Alpha Shepherd whined and rose, staggering beside them, refusing to be left behind. The other two followed clumsily, tails tucked, ribs heaving. The medics strapped Brooks in and carried him toward the ambulance. Evelyn moved toward her van, opening the rear hatch lined with blankets and cages. Ryan guided the dogs one by one toward it, speaking softly, coaxing them forward. "Good dogs," he murmured. "You've done enough for tonight." By the time the vehicles pulled away, ambulance leading, veterinary truck behind, the storm had nearly stopped. The road glistened in the faint orange glow of dawn creeping over the ridge. Ryan stood there for a moment, staring after them, his breath rising in faint curls of steam. 3 dogs, a dying fugitive, and more questions than answers. He finally turned back to his SUV, keying his radio. "Dispatch," he said quietly. "Callahan here. Send word to the federal office. I've got Daniel Brooks alive and 3 animals taken into custody for medical evaluation." The reply came through, clear this time. "Copy that, Deputy. Good work. You bringing him in yourself?" Ryan looked toward the distant blinking lights as they disappeared around the bend. "Yeah," he said, climbing into his SUV. "I'll follow them in. This one feels different." The snow had stopped, but something else had begun. Something Ryan could feel deep in his gut, the way soldiers feel the calm before another storm. Morning broke over Pine Valley with a pale, uncertain light. The storm had passed, leaving the town glazed in ice and silence. In the small county hospital, the corridors smelled faintly of antiseptic and old pine floors. Deputy Ryan Callahan stood by the window of room 214, his uniform still marked by the night before, mud on his boots, frostburn on his hands, and exhaustion etched across his face. He'd been there since dawn, waiting for the man who had almost bled out in the snow to wake. On the bed, Daniel Brooks stirred. His arm was wrapped in gauze, a thick bandage circling his thigh. A heart monitor beeped steadily beside him, slow but constant. The man looked different in the light. 42, medium build, unshaven, with the streaks of gray in his dark hair and the kind of face that had seen too many bad roads. His wrists bore faint scars from handcuffs long gone. A pair of federal agents had called earlier, confirming his identity but unable to reach the town until the next day due to the storm. That left Ryan as the one to ask the questions. Dr. Evelyn Hart had checked on him earlier, her tired hands adjusting the IV line. Now she stood in the doorway, sipping coffee from a paper cup. "He's stable," she said quietly. "Shock's wearing off. If you want answers, this is your window." Ryan nodded. "Thanks, Doc." He waited another moment, watching Daniel's breathing steady before pulling a chair closer to the bed. "Daniel Brooks," he said evenly. "You're lucky we found you when we did. Care to tell me how a man with a federal warrant ends up half dead in the snow with 3 dogs on top of him?" Daniel opened his eyes slowly. For a long moment, he just stared at the ceiling. His voice, when it came, was rough, like gravel dragged across metal. "Did they make it?" Ryan frowned. "Who?" "The dogs," Daniel whispered. "Rex, Luna, and Finn. They didn't kill them, did they?" Ryan's tone softened. "They're alive. The vet's taking care of them. Looked like they'd been through hell." Daniel let out a breath that might have been relief or regret. His eyes closed again. "They were never supposed to turn on me." Ryan leaned forward. "Start from the beginning." For a moment, Daniel didn't speak. His hands clenched against the sheets. Then, quietly, he began. 2 years ago, I was part of a private security outfit out of Denver. We were supposed to train canine units for federal contractors. Dogs meant for controlled environments, not police work. A man named Victor Kane ran the operation. You might have heard of him if you dig deep enough. Ex-Army intelligence, black market ties. The kind of man who thinks loyalty is just another leash. Ryan's brows furrowed. "And you worked for him?" "I did," Daniel said bitterly. "Until I didn't." He stared at his hands. The dogs, those 3, were from his batch. They were trained for aggression, not control. Shock collars, deprivation, even starvation, anything to make them attack on command. I thought I could change that, make them usable for law enforcement instead of mercenary work. I was stupid. Ryan stayed quiet, letting him talk. Daniel's voice wavered slightly. "When I found out Victor was smuggling weapons using the same transport crates meant for the dogs, I confronted him. I told him I'd go to the feds. He smiled, shook my hand, and 2 days later my ID was planted at a weapons site outside Cheyenne. Suddenly, I was the one on the wanted list." He swallowed hard. "They came for me, my own team. I ran." Ryan nodded slowly. "And the dogs?" Daniel's eyes grew distant. "He locked them up, said they were property. I went back to get them last week, after months in hiding. I couldn't leave them behind. When I broke into the facility, I found them half-starved, chained in their cages. I opened the gates, and—" his voice faltered. "They didn't recognize me anymore. Rex, he was the first to break loose. He was always the strongest. They were so hungry, so afraid. They attacked before I could even raise a hand." Silence settled between them, heavy and sharp. The only sound was the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Ryan rubbed a hand over his jaw, thinking. "So, they attacked you because they were starving, not because you trained them to kill." Daniel nodded weakly. "I don't blame them. They were made that way. Victor used pain until pain was all they understood." Ryan stood, pacing once across the room. "And what's Victor Kane doing now?" Daniel let out a humorless laugh. "Sitting somewhere warm, selling weapons he never had to smuggle himself. He's the kind of man who leaves no witnesses and no paper trail." Ryan's expression hardened. He'd dealt with men like that before, men who wore authority like armor but bled others dry beneath it. "You're saying you're innocent." Daniel looked up at him. "I'm saying I didn't choose this. The feds won't care. To them, I'm a fugitive who ran from justice. But those dogs—" He swallowed again. "They're the real victims here." Ryan didn't answer. Outside the window, snow fell lightly again, thin flakes glittering in the pale sun. Later that afternoon, Ryan walked to the county animal care wing, a converted outbuilding connected to the hospital. The walls were lined with kennels, heaters humming faintly to push away the cold. The smell of disinfectant and wet fur filled the air. Inside, Rex, the largest of the 3 shepherds, stood upright in his enclosure. 5 years old, black and tan coat glistening under the lights, powerful shoulders and a scarred muzzle, He was a creature carved from discipline and damage. His deep brown eyes followed every movement Ryan made. The other two, Luna and Finn, were lying down, Luna's ribs wrapped in bandages, Finn's paw resting on a padded blanket where the shackle had been removed. Both trembled faintly, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Ryan stopped in front of Rex's cage. The dog didn't growl, but his gaze was steady, alert, unreadable. "You remember me," Ryan said quietly. "Last night in the snow." Rex tilted his head slightly, nostrils flaring. Dr. Evelyn entered behind him, clipboard in hand. "He's the Alpha," she said softly. "Barely let me near him, but he's not attacking. That's something. They were dehydrated, malnourished, but they'll live." Ryan nodded, eyes still on Rex. "How long until they're cleared?" Evelyn frowned. "Physically, a few days. Psychologically? That's harder to say. They've been through something most humans wouldn't survive." Rex's tail twitched once, a small, uncertain motion. Ryan crouched slightly, keeping his hands visible. "You're a good boy, aren't you?" he murmured. "You just didn't have anyone left to trust." The dog didn't move, but didn't back away either. His eyes held something strange. Awareness, maybe even guilt. Evelyn spoke quietly. "Sometimes they remember the person who saved them. Sometimes they only remember the pain." Ryan exhaled. Maybe he remembers both. As he left the room, he glanced through the small window into Daniel's ward. The man was asleep again, one hand resting near the bandaged leg. Ryan's mind churned with questions. If what Daniel said was true, there was a bigger story behind this, a network maybe, something federal. But for now, all he could see were the eyes of the dog staring back at him. That night, long after the snow stopped, Ryan sat in his truck outside the hospital, lights off, engine idling. The storm had taken the noise away. The town lay quiet, breathing under its blanket of frost. He reached into the glove box and pulled out a worn photo, a black and white picture of his old canine partner, Shadow, taken before their last deployment. The dog's ears were pricked, eyes steady, same as Rex's. Ryan ran a thumb over the picture, then looked up at the hospital lights flickering through the snow. "Guess I'm not done with dogs after all," he muttered. Inside the kennels, Rex lifted his head at the sound of distant footsteps and gave a quiet rumbling whine, neither threat nor plea, but something in between. The following morning broke gray and windless over Pine Valley. Snowmelt slid from the hospital eaves in thin glassy lines, freezing again before it reached the ground. Deputy Ryan Callahan walked down the hallway toward the recovery ward, his notebook tucked under one arm, the other hand wrapped around a cup of coffee that had already gone cold. He hadn't slept much. Between the storm, the federal paperwork, and the thoughts of 3 broken German shepherds pacing behind wire walls, his mind refused to rest. Inside room 214, Daniel Brooks sat upright, pale and gaunt, staring at the window as if the whiteness beyond it could wash away everything behind him. His hair was clean now, slicked back by hospital water, and he wore the standard blue gown. A bandage wrapped his left thigh, and his eyes, gray with faint traces of green, seemed older than they should have been. Ryan closed the door softly. "Morning, Brooks." Daniel turned, offering a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Deputy Callahan, guess I'm still alive?" "Barely," Ryan said, pulling up a chair. He flipped open his notebook. "You said yesterday your old crew set you up. I need names, dates, everything you remember. Let's start with the man you mentioned, Victor Kane." Daniel leaned back, grimacing as pain flickered through his leg. "Victor," he said slowly, tasting the name like rust on his tongue. "He's not the kind of man who makes enemies. He makes tools. People are just parts to him. I was one of them." "Go on." Daniel exhaled, staring past Ryan. 2 years ago, Kane ran an import business out of Denver, at least on paper. Officially, he was a logistics coordinator for a private defense contractor, handling gear shipments for training facilities. In reality, those shipments carried more than gear. Black market rifles, ammunition, sometimes experimental tech stolen from military labs. He was making millions off it. Ryan jotted notes quietly. And you were involved? I handled the dogs, Daniel said. Training, certification paperwork. I thought I was part of something legitimate until I started noticing crates that didn't match the manifests. I opened one and inside were rifles coated in grease, packed with veterinary equipment. That was the moment I knew I'd stepped into something bad. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. And you confronted him? Daniel nodded. I tried. He laughed. Said I could either keep my mouth shut and get paid, or become a story. A few days later, his men staged a hit, shot one of our drivers, and left my wallet near the body. The next morning, I was on the news. Federal contractor employee wanted in connection with homicide and smuggling. Kane didn't need to kill me. He killed my name instead. Ryan scribbled in his notebook, but doubt flickered behind his expression. That's a hell of a story. Daniel met his gaze, his voice breaking with fatigue. You think I'm lying? I think I've heard plenty of men tell stories to save themselves, Ryan said carefully, but not all of them look this broken when they do it. Daniel's eyes drifted to his hands. You saw the dogs, he said softly. You saw what he made of them. You think a man like that would hesitate to do worse to people? Ryan didn't answer. He flipped the notebook shut. If Kane did this, there'll be a trail. Bank accounts, supply records, communications. I'll run it. Daniel smiled bitterly. Good luck. Men like Victor don't leave trails. They leave ghosts. The conversation faded into silence. Ryan stood to leave, but Daniel's voice caught him halfway to the door. If you go looking for him, he said, don't go alone. He knows how to make men disappear. Ryan paused, looking back. I don't scare easy, Brooks. Daniel's lips curved faintly. That's what they said about the last deputy who tried. Ryan didn't ask what happened to that man. Some things didn't need answers yet. He left the hospital and headed toward the county canine training facility at the edge of Pine Valley, a cluster of fenced yards, old kennels, and the muffled barking of dogs echoing across the frozen air. Officer Karen Doyle, 41, met him at the gate. She was a short, broad-shouldered woman with chestnut hair pulled into a tight ponytail and the posture of someone who'd spent most of her life on the field. Her heavy winter parka bore the county emblem, and a set of keys jangled from her belt. Heard you brought us 3 nasty ones, she said, half grinning. They've had worse handlers than you, Ryan replied. Karen snorted. That's a low bar. She led him inside, her boots crunching over gravel. We've got them separated for now. The alpha, Rex, right? Hasn't made a sound since he got here. Just stands there watching everyone like he's waiting for something. They entered the main kennel building. The air smelled of disinfectant and straw. Dozens of dogs barked or whined as they passed, but when they reached the back enclosure, everything went still. Rex stood by the gate, tall and regal despite the scars across his muzzle. The black and tan coat gleamed faintly under the light. His posture was rigid but not aggressive, like a soldier on silent guard. Behind him, Luna and Finn huddled together on a blanket, eyes half closed, bodies rising and falling with slow breaths. Karen leaned on the railing. He's something, isn't he? Most dogs this abused turn skittish or savage. This one, it's like he's thinking. Ryan nodded. He stepped closer, stopping just short of the fence. Rex's gaze shifted to him instantly, dark brown eyes fixed, unblinking. The silence between them was thick enough to feel. Hey there, Ryan said softly. Remember me? The dog didn't move, but his ears flicked forward slightly. Ryan crouched down, resting his arms on his knees. You're not supposed to be here, are you? You should have been out there doing what you were trained for, saving lives, not tearing them apart. For the first time, Rex tilted his head slightly. Karen frowned. He only does that with you. Ryan smiled faintly. He knows I'm not afraid. As he stood, his gaze drifted over the other dogs. You'll keep them warm, feed them, right? Karen nodded. They'll get treated like the rest, but if the feds decide they're too dangerous, they'll be transferred to Denver for evaluation. Meaning they won't come back, Ryan said quietly. Karen hesitated. That's the law, Ryan. You know that." He did, and it sat heavy in his chest. Before leaving, he walked back to Rex's enclosure one more time. The dog hadn't looked away once. Ryan placed a hand against the wire fence, palm flat. Rex didn't move closer, but he didn't retreat either. Their breaths clouded the air between them, two survivors staring across an invisible line neither had chosen to cross. Driving back to the station later, Ryan thought about Daniel's words. The betrayal, the story of Cain, the way the dogs had turned on their master out of starvation. It all fit too neatly, yet something still felt off. People lied for many reasons, but their eyes always gave them away. And Daniel's eyes had been the eyes of a man who'd already lost everything. At a red light, Ryan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn dog tag, the one that belonged to Shadow, his old canine partner from his Marine days. He turned it over in his hand, reading the engraved line, "Faithful till the end." He tucked it back into his pocket and whispered under his breath, "Guess I owe these dogs the same." The wind picked up again, sweeping thin veils of snow across the valley, carrying with it the sound of distant barking. Ryan drove on, unaware that the threads of truth and betrayal were already tangling around him, as silent and certain as the winter night. Snow fell again that evening, light and silent, covering Pine Valley in a fragile layer of peace that felt undeserved. The wind carried the scent of pine and cold metal as Deputy Ryan Callahan parked his patrol SUV in front of the station. The headlights washed over the half-empty lot, the only sign of life the flickering lamp near the entrance. He stepped out, jacket collar up, his breath curling into the frozen air. Inside, the warmth hit him like a wave. Coffee brewing, paper rustling, the low hum of old fluorescent lights. Ryan carried a brown evidence bag under his arm. Inside it, the torn jacket that had belonged to Daniel Brooks, stained with blood, ripped at the shoulder, and heavier than it looked. Something about it had nagged at him since the hospital. He had handled too many cases where truth was buried beneath fabric, dirt, and silence. And Daniel's story, as wild as it sounded, had the scent of half-truth, something missing, something hidden. He set the bag down on his desk, pulled on a pair of latex gloves, and unzipped it carefully. The jacket's inside lining was thicker on one side, reinforced, as if someone had altered it. Ryan frowned, running his fingers along the seams. He tugged slightly, and a faint tearing sound broke the quiet. The stitching gave way to reveal a narrow slit. He reached in and pulled out a small black USB drive, the surface scratched but intact. He stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "Well, Daniel, looks like you weren't done telling me everything." Ryan booted up the station's old desktop computer, its fan wheezing in protest. He inserted the USB and waited. A folder popped open on the screen. Inside were hundreds of encrypted documents, each labeled with dates and serial numbers. He opened one of the few text files that wasn't password protected. Shipment log. VK Holdings, 2022 to 2023. The entries were written in coded shorthand, but Ryan recognized enough. Locations, container IDs, abbreviations for rifle models, ammunition calibers, and recipient initials. It was a ledger of illegal weapons shipments, consistent with Daniel's claims, but something was missing. There were no names, no digital signatures, no images or correspondence linking Victor Cain directly to the crimes. It was like having a map with no compass. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The case had just grown deeper and murkier. Without solid proof, the feds would dismiss it as another fugitive's fantasy. Yet, Daniel had risked everything to protect this drive. Ryan saved a copy on a secure folder and disconnected the USB. He slipped it into a small evidence pouch, labeling it himself before sealing it. The sound of claws on tile interrupted his thoughts. He looked up. Standing in the doorway of the station was Rex, the black and tan German shepherd from the canine facility. A faint dusting of snow clung to his fur. His deep brown eyes fixed on Ryan as if demanding attention. Behind him, Officer Karen Doyle appeared, slightly out of breath, her parka half-zipped. "Sorry," she said. "He slipped the gate. I was feeding the others when he just bolted. Ran all the way here?" Ryan stood, surprised but not alarmed. "He came straight to me?" Karen nodded. "Wouldn't stop. Followed your scent, maybe. You two have a weird connection." Rex stepped forward, sniffing the air, then the desk. His nose pressed against the bloodied jacket. The low, guttural sound that followed wasn't a growl. It was something else. Urgent. He pawed the fabric, nostrils flaring, then looked at Ryan and barked once, sharp and deliberate. Ryan blinked. "What is it, boy?" The dog barked again, tail stiff, then turned toward the door as if waiting for him to follow. Karen folded her arms, skeptical. "You think he's trying to show you something?" Ryan hesitated. He had seen trained canines respond to specific cues, but Rex wasn't one of his. Not officially. Still, the intensity in the dog's eyes reminded him of his old partner, Shadow. The same look when danger was near, when instinct screamed louder than logic. "Yeah," Ryan said slowly, grabbing his coat. "Maybe I do." He clipped a spare leash from the wall, though Rex didn't need it. The dog matched his pace without resistance as they stepped out into the cold night. The town was silent, but for the crunch of snow under their boots. Ryan followed Rex across the parking lot, through the back road that led toward the edge of Pine Valley where the forest began again. Karen trailed behind for a while before stopping at the corner. "You're going into the woods alone with him?" Ryan glanced back. "You're welcome to file that under bad decisions." She shook her head with a half-smile. "Be careful, Callahan. That dog's got ghosts." "So do I," Ryan said, and kept walking. The night deepened as they entered the tree line. The air smelled of pine, earth, and frost. Rex moved steadily, nose to the ground, stopping now and then to sniff the wind. He was tracking something. Ryan didn't know what. After a few hundred yards, they reached a small clearing where tire tracks crisscrossed beneath the snow, half frozen and half erased by the storm. Rex stopped suddenly, growled low, then began pawing at a mound of snow near the tree base. Ryan knelt beside him, brushing the snow away. Beneath it was a small patch of disturbed earth, and the corner of a metal crate barely visible under the frost. He scraped more snow off, revealing a shipping label, the ink smudged but still legible. VK Holdings, Denver Logistics Division. Ryan's pulse quickened. "Well, I'll be damned." He tugged at the edge of the crate, but it was buried deep and frozen solid. Rex barked again, circling around it, tail raised. Ryan drew his phone and snapped a few photos, then radioed the station. "Dispatch, this is Callahan. I've got what looks like a buried transport. Container east of Marker 6. Coordinates incoming. Send backup and a recovery unit." The dispatcher confirmed, her voice crackling over static. Ryan looked at Rex, who had settled beside the crate now, breathing steady but alert. "Good work, boy," he said softly. Rex looked up at him, and for a fleeting moment Ryan could swear there was understanding in those deep brown eyes, a silent exchange between two survivors of different wars. Minutes later, headlights pierced the trees. Karen arrived with the two deputies and a small winch truck. Together they cleared more snow and lifted the lid of the crate. Inside were empty foam weapon casings. No guns, but serial markings on the foam suggested they had held rifles recently shipped out. A few loose papers fluttered at the bottom, soaked from the melt. Karen picked one up carefully. Shipping manifest. No destination listed. Just initials, VK. Ryan exhaled, watching the evidence bag fill. "That's our first real lead." Karen smiled faintly. "Or a very clever setup." "Either way," Ryan said, glancing at Rex, "he's the one who found it." The dog stood proudly beside the open crate, chest heaving, ears forward, as though claiming his role in whatever came next. Back at the station, after the crate had been secured and logged, Ryan stood outside under the falling snow. The wind had died down. He looked at the stars faintly breaking through the clouds, the USB in his pocket heavy as a secret. Somewhere out there, Victor Kane was still moving his pieces. Ryan glanced at Rex resting by the door, his fur silvered under the streetlight. "You led me here, didn't you?" he murmured. "Guess I'll follow your lead for a while longer." Rex gave a low huff in response, curling up beside the steps. The night was quiet again, but Ryan could feel the storm shifting. Not in the sky, but beneath the calm surface of what they had begun to uncover. The sky above Pine Valley had turned a bruised gray by nightfall, heavy with the promise of another storm. Deputy Ryan Callahan tightened his winter jacket and adjusted the strap of his rifle as he stood beside his patrol SUV. The engine hummed softly in the cold, while steam curled from the exhaust. Across from him, Rex and the two other German shepherds, Luna and Finn, waited in silence. Their breath rose like smoke in the frigid air. It had been hours since the discovery of the buried crate. The shipment logs and serial codes from the USB now pointed to another location marked only by initials and a rough coordinate tag. Ryan wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or a breadcrumb left for anyone bold enough to follow. Either way, he was done waiting. He crouched beside Rex, checking the harness snug against the dog's broad chest. "All right, boy," he said quietly. "Show me where this trail ends." Rex lifted his muzzle and sniffed the torn scrap of shipping label Ryan had taken from the crate. A low rumble built in the dog's throat before he turned toward the tree line, muscles tense with purpose. The other two dogs followed instinctively, silent, alert, as if the snow itself were listening. Ryan grabbed his flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness. Behind him, the woods stretched endless, the ground thick with fresh snow that swallowed every sound. The moon hung faint behind the clouds, casting only a faint shimmer on the frost. The trail led them deeper into the forest, where the trees grew tighter, branches bending under the weight of ice. Rex moved with uncanny focus, head low, tail rigid. He'd pause every few yards to sniff, paw the ground, then move on, leaving a clear path for Ryan to follow. Luna and Finn flanked him, scanning the shadows. After nearly an hour, Ryan began to see shapes through the fog of his breath, a faint outline against the slope ahead. It was a cabin, old and half buried in snow. The roof sagged under the weight, and the windows were boarded shut. It looked abandoned, forgotten by time. Ryan slowed his pace, motioning for the dogs to stop. They obeyed instantly, crouching low. He turned off his flashlight, letting his eyes adjust to the dim blue glow of moonlight. The cabin stood silent, but something about it felt wrong. Too still, too intact for years of disuse. He unholstered his weapon, whispering, "Stay close." They approached quietly, boots crunching softly on the snow. The front door was ajar, a faint creak in the wind. Ryan nudged it open with the muzzle of his gun. The smell hit him first: oil, metal, and gunpowder. Inside, faint light flickered from a single camping lantern placed on a crate. The air was thick with cold and the scent of rust. Stacked along the walls were wooden boxes, many stamped with the same initials he'd seen before: V.K. Holdings. He pried one open with his knife, and inside, neatly packed, were rows of ammunition. Different calibers, clearly not. Meant for legal trade. He exhaled slowly. "Well, Daniel," he murmured, "looks like you were telling the truth." Rex padded forward, sniffing one of the crates. His ears twitched, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. Ryan followed his gaze toward the far corner of the room. There, half hidden under a tarp, was a set of military-grade weapon cases. Clean, labeled, untouched by dust. Ryan crouched to inspect one, flipping it open. Inside lay disassembled assault rifles, each one tagged for export. His pulse quickened. This was enough evidence to tie Victor Kane directly to illegal arms distribution. He lifted his radio and whispered, "Dispatch, this is Deputy Callahan. I've located a weapons cache inside an abandoned cabin off Ridge Trail, East Sector. Requesting immediate backup and federal contact. Repeat, potential arms trafficking site." Static answered first, then the faint voice of the dispatcher, shaky and distant. "Copy that, Callahan. Backup en route. Estimated arrival, 15 minutes. Hold position and proceed with caution." "Roger that," he said, setting the radio down. He turned to Rex and the others. "We're not alone here, are we?" The dogs had gone still, ears perked toward the window. Then Rex's lips peeled back, a low, warning snarl vibrating deep in his throat. Ryan froze. Outside, faintly through the storm, came the sound of footsteps crunching on snow, then voices, low, muffled, deliberate. He killed the lantern instantly, plunging the room into darkness. The only light came from the faint slits of moon through the boarded windows. He motioned to the dogs to stay quiet, stepping behind one of the ammo crates. The wind rattled the door hinges softly. Then it swung open. 3 men entered, bundled in dark winter coats, rifles slung across their shoulders. The leader stepped into the moonlight first. Victor Kane. He was in his late 40s, tall and broad, with short, silver-threaded hair slicked back from a hard face. His eyes were sharp, icy blue, the kind that calculated before they blinked. He wore a black military coat lined with fur, expensive and spotless despite the weather. Behind him were 2 men in tactical gear, younger, leaner, faces obscured by scarves. "Well," Victor said with a calm smile, "I didn't expect company tonight." His voice was smooth, deliberate, the kind that came from years of command. He noticed the open crate. "You've been busy." Ryan stood slowly, gun raised, voice steady. "Victor Kane, you're under investigation for federal weapons trafficking. Put your hands where I can see them." Victor's smile didn't fade. "Deputy, I admire your courage, but you're standing in the middle of evidence that could destroy men far bigger than me. You really think you're walking out of here with it?" Ryan tightened his grip. "Try me." One of the men raised his rifle. Ryan fired a single warning shot into the ceiling. "Don't!" he barked. "I won't miss next time." The echo boomed through the cabin, shaking dust from the rafters. The dogs tensed, ready to spring. Victor took a slow step forward, hands slightly raised, his expression unreadable. "You think this is about me? You have no idea what you're stepping into." Rex growled louder now, teeth bared, body poised like a coiled spring. The man on Victor's left twitched nervously, finger brushing the trigger. The flash came first. One of the gunmen fired, a deafening crack that split the silence. Ryan dove for cover, the bullet grazing his sleeve. Rex moved before thought could catch up. The dog lunged forward, slamming into Ryan's side just as another shot rang out. The 2 of them tumbled behind a stack of crates, splinters flying. The bullet buried itself in the wooden wall where Ryan's head had been a second earlier. "Rex!" Ryan gasped, looking down. The dog was unhurt, crouched protectively in front of him, fur bristling. The other 2 shepherds snarled from the shadows, forming a living barrier between Ryan and the attackers. Victor's voice cut through the gunfire. "Take him alive!" Ryan rolled to one knee and fired back, hitting a lantern and plunging the room into near darkness. Muzzle flashes sparked like lightning as the fight erupted. The air filled with smoke, shouting, and the thunder of gunfire. Rex darted forward, fast as a shadow, knocking one of the gunmen off his feet. The man screamed, his rifle skidding across the floor. Ryan used the distraction to grab cover behind another crate, returning fire toward the doorway. When the last shot echoed away, only the sound of heavy breathing filled the room. The second gunman was down, the first unconscious. The doorway stood open, Victor Kane nowhere to be seen, his footprints already fading into the storm outside. Ryan exhaled, lowering his weapon. His heart pounded against his ribs. He looked at Rex, whose chest rose and fell rapidly, snow dusting his muzzle. The dog's eyes met his, steady, protective, alive. "You saved my life," Ryan said softly, disbelief mixing with gratitude. Rex gave a single quiet bark, tail low but wagging once. Outside, sirens began to wail faintly in the distance. The backup was finally on its way. Ryan holstered his weapon, looking around at the shattered crates, the fallen gunman, and the loyal dog beside him. The line between man and beast had blurred tonight, and for the first time, Rex had chosen to protect, not attack. Snow clouds gathered again over Pine Valley as dusk settled in, swallowing the horizon in muted shades of gray and violet. The storm from the night before had left the forest white and silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Inside the sheriff's station, the air was thick with tension. Deputy Ryan Callahan sat at his desk, his jacket half unzipped, sleeves rolled up, the scent of gunpowder and smoke still clinging to his clothes. The reports lay scattered in front of him, typed statements, photographs of the cabin, confiscated weapons, and the name that tied it all together, Victor Kane. The man had finally been caught. Across the hallway, muffled voices came from the interrogation room. Ryan could see through the small glass window. Victor sat handcuffed at the metal table, perfectly composed despite the bruises on his jaw and temple. His slick, silver-streaked hair was combed back, his sharp blue eyes unreadable. A tailored black coat hung neatly over the back of the chair, as if he were merely waiting for a meeting to begin. Standing near the door was Sheriff Darnell Graves, a heavy-set man in his 50s with graying stubble and a belly pressing against his tan uniform. He'd been sheriff for nearly 20 years, the kind of man who believed paperwork solved more problems than bullets. Ryan respected him once, but right now, he wasn't sure what to think. Darnell stepped out of the interrogation room, closing the door quietly behind him. "You did good work last night, Callahan," he said, voice low, gravelly from too much coffee and not enough rest. "But I need you to head home and get some sleep. FBI will take over in the morning." Ryan frowned. "He's the one, Sheriff. He's been moving weapons through half the state under fake logistics contracts. We've got crates, serial logs, witness statements. Why not push now?" Darnell gave him a weary look. "Because we're a small-town department, Ryan. Our job's to hand over and step back. Let the bigger fish handle it." Ryan's jaw tightened. "He won't stay locked up. You know that as well as I do." Darnell hesitated, then sighed. "He's got lawyers crawling all over the state capitol. Let's not give him a reason to call this harassment." He started to walk away, then added, "And don't go digging on your own. That man's connected to people you don't want to cross." Ryan didn't answer. He just watched the sheriff's back fade into the hallway's fluorescent light, his gut heavy with unease. That night, Victor Kane was moved to the county holding cell, a small concrete room with a single barred window and 2 guards on rotation. Ryan stayed late at his desk, unable to leave. His eyes flicked to the security feed every few minutes, half expecting to see something go wrong. It didn't take long. Around midnight, an unmarked black SUV pulled up quietly outside the station. Within 30 minutes, paperwork arrived. Official-looking, stamped, and signed by a Judge Harold Klein, a man Ryan had only heard of through whispered conversations about favors. The order was clear. Victor Kane was to be released pending federal transfer, effective immediately. Ryan stood frozen, disbelief turning to anger. "This is insane," he snapped at the desk officer. "He's under active investigation. You can't just let him walk." The officer, a nervous young man barely out of training, stammered, "The order came from the top, sir. Sheriff Graves approved it." Ryan turned toward the hallway just as Darnell appeared, coat in hand. "Stand down, Callahan," he said firmly. "It's out of our jurisdiction now." Ryan took a step closer, voice tight with restrained fury. "You're letting a federal arms trafficker walk out into the night." Darnell's expression hardened. "I'm following the law. You should do the same." Through the glass door, Ryan saw 2 men in suits, federal escorts supposedly, leading Victor Kane toward the exit. Victor's smile caught the light, small and self-assured, like a man who had just finished a business meeting. He paused as he passed Ryan, his cuffed hands resting lightly in front of him. "You really should have taken that advice, Deputy," he said softly. "Some wars can't be won from the inside." Then he was gone, swallowed by the storm outside. Ryan stood in the empty lobby long after the taillights vanished. The silence pressed against his ears. He clenched his fists, the weight of helplessness settling in like cold stone. Back at the county hospital, Daniel Brooks sat upright in his bed, pale under the fluorescent light, his face lit with worry the moment Ryan entered. "You let him go," Daniel said, his voice a whisper edged with despair. Ryan didn't deny it. They had paperwork, Federal clearance, fake or not. Daniel shook his head. You don't understand. He's not just protected, he owns them. Judges, marshals, even a few state deputies. That's how he made me disappear. He'll do the same to you if you keep digging. Ryan leaned against the wall, exhaustion settling into his bones. Then I'll dig quieter. Daniel's eyes widened. You'll end up like me, branded a traitor, hunted, left to die in the snow. Ryan gave a faint smile. Difference is, I've got backup this time. At that, Rex stirred from where he lay by the door, his head resting on his paws. The large German shepherd looked up, one ear pricked. A fresh bandage wrapped his right shoulder, covering the graze from the gunfight at the cabin. Ryan had cleaned and dressed it himself earlier that morning in the station garage. He remembered how the dog had stood still as he'd worked, flinching only once when the antiseptic burned. His deep brown eyes locked on Ryan's the whole time, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Now, as Ryan crossed the room, Rex lifted his head fully and wagged his tail once. The simple gesture hit deeper than expected. Yeah, Ryan murmured, kneeling beside him. You're stuck with me now. He checked the bandage again, smoothing it gently. You saved my life, Rex. Don't think I've forgotten. Rex exhaled softly, leaning his head against Ryan's leg. It wasn't obedience. It was understanding. From that moment, the distance between them vanished. The dog, who had once attacked out of fear, now followed Ryan's every movement with quiet loyalty. Daniel watched the exchange, a faint smile crossing his tired face. He trusts you, he said softly. That's rare. Means he sees something worth following. Ryan glanced at the window where snow was beginning to fall again, veiling the world in white. And we'd better give him something to believe in. Later that night, long after the hospital had gone quiet, Ryan sat in his SUV outside, the defroster humming faintly. The town lights glowed like small fires through the snowfall. He replayed the night's events in his mind. The look on Victor's face, the silence from the sheriff, the feel of betrayal gnawing at the edge of his thoughts. He opened his glove box and pulled out the USB drive once more, its scratched surface catching the dim dashboard light. Somewhere inside it were the names, routes, and signatures that could bring everything crashing down, if he could decode them before someone stopped him. Rex shifted in the passenger seat, resting his head on Ryan's shoulder. Don't worry, partner, Ryan murmured, starting the engine. We're not done yet. The tires crunched through the snow as he drove off into the dark, headlights cutting narrow paths through the storm, the weight of truth pressing harder than ever. Somewhere out there, Victor Kane was watching, and Ryan knew one thing for certain. Next time they met, one of them wouldn't walk away. The morning sun struggled through the frost-clouded windows of Pine Valley Sheriff's Department, painting the office in pale gold. The world outside was blanketed in snow, untouched and innocent-looking. A sharp contrast to the corruption Ryan Callahan was now certain lived inside the very walls he worked under. Ryan sat at his desk, the USB drive plugged into his laptop. His face was drawn, the dark circles under his eyes deepened by sleepless nights. The faint hum of the heater filled the room as he scrolled through encrypted files. He'd spent the last 2 days decoding fragments, cross-referencing shipment IDs with the local transport records. Each log pointed toward shell companies registered to fake addresses, until one detail stopped him cold. A name. Deputy Harold J. Reeves. The same man who'd been with the department for over a decade, known for his calm manner and easy smile. Harold was in his early 40s, tall, sandy-haired, with a neatly trimmed beard and a habit of wearing his badge slightly crooked on his belt. To most, he was the friendly kind of officer people waved to at diners, but according to the data, his bank account had been receiving steady transfers from VK Holdings for over 6 months. Ryan leaned back in his chair, the realization settling like ice in his gut. It wasn't just Victor Kane who had power, it was his reach that poisoned everything around him. Rex stirred beside his desk, lifting his head from between his paws. The German shepherd's amber eyes met Ryan's, alert and questioning. Ryan smiled faintly and reached down to scratch behind his ear. You've got good instincts, partner. Guess it's time to test mine." He stood, grabbed his coat, and tucked the USB safely into his inner pocket. At the far end of the hallway, the door to Harold's office stood open. Inside, Harold was leaning over a pile of case reports, his tan uniform crisp, coffee mug steaming beside him. He looked up as Ryan just entered. "Morning, Callahan," Harold said, his voice casual, warm as ever. "You look like hell. You sleeping at all?" "Not much," Ryan replied, leaning against the doorframe. "Been piecing through the files from the Kane case. Found some inconsistencies." Harold chuckled softly. "That's no surprise. The feds and locals mix reports like oil and water. You'll drive yourself crazy trying to make sense of it." "Maybe," Ryan said slowly, stepping closer. "Or maybe I'll find out who's been helping Kane move his shipments right under our noses." The older deputy's smile faltered for just a second, barely noticeable, but Ryan saw it. He'd spent years reading faces, and that flicker of tension told him more than words could. Harold's tone changed, cautious now. "You throwing accusations, son?" Ryan's voice stayed calm. "I'm just asking why your name's all over transaction logs from VK Holdings. Thousands of dollars, regular deposits, strange hobby. For a county deputy." Harold's hand tightened around his coffee mug. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Maybe not," Ryan said, pulling a printed ledger from his coat pocket and tossing it onto the desk. "But this does." Harold's eyes flicked to the paper, and for the first time his charm dropped completely. Beneath it was cold calculation. "You shouldn't have dug that deep," he said softly. Ryan's hand hovered near his holster. "That sounds like a threat." "It's advice," Harold replied, voice almost regretful. "Kane's not the only one who has friends in high places. You think a county boy like me could pull this off alone? I'm just keeping the peace the way it's meant to be kept." Ryan took another step forward. "By selling out your badge?" Harold exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "The badge doesn't mean what it used to, Callahan. You fight too hard, and they'll bury you. I chose survival." "Then you chose the wrong side," Ryan said quietly. Before Harold could respond, a low growl filled the room. Rex had slipped in silently, his massive frame blocking the doorway, eyes fixed on Harold. The tension hung like static. Ryan didn't raise his gun. He didn't have to. Harold's expression shifted, the color draining from his face. He slowly lifted his hands. "Easy," he said. "You're making a mistake." "No," Ryan said, pulling out his handcuffs. "The mistake was trusting you." 10 minutes later, Harold Reeves sat cuffed in the holding cell once reserved for drunks and petty thieves. His calm facade was gone, replaced by silent fury. Ryan stood outside the bars, hands in his pockets. "You could have walked away, Harold, but you sold out your oath for pocket change." Harold glared at him, voice low. "You think it ends with me? Kane owns this county. You can't stop him." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Maybe not, but now he knows I'm coming." When Ryan turned to leave, Rex followed close, tail brushing his leg as they stepped into the snow-lit afternoon. That evening, back at the station's old kennel yard, the other two shepherds, Luna and Finn, paced restlessly behind the chain-link fence. The temporary holding order had expired, and Animal Services was preparing to transfer them to Denver for evaluation, a polite term for potential euthanasia. Ryan couldn't shake the thought of those scarred dogs facing another cage after everything they'd survived. He went to Sheriff Darnell's office, where the older man was signing paperwork with his glasses perched low on his nose. "I want custody of the shepherds," Ryan said without preamble. "All 3 of them." Darnell blinked. "You're kidding." "I'm not. I'll take full responsibility. I'll keep them at my property outside town. You know they're not a danger anymore." Darnell studied him for a moment, then sighed heavily. "You're stretching your leash, Callahan. But hell, you've earned it. Sign the release forms and they're yours. Just keep them out of town limits." Ryan nodded. "Understood." 2 hours later, under the dim light of the street lamps, the kennel gates swung open. Rex, Luna, and Finn stepped out cautiously, their paws pressing into the snow. For the first time, there were no chains, no orders, just freedom. Ryan knelt beside them, offering a quiet smile. No cages, no collars. You're home now. Rex sniffed his gloved hand, then pressed his head against Ryan's arm. Luna settled near the patrol SUV's tires, curling into a ball, while Finn rolled onto his side, tail thumping softly against the ground. When Ryan finally went inside his small cabin later that night, the dogs followed without hesitation. He hung his coat by the door, the fire crackling faintly in the hearth. Rex settled near the window, Finn by the couch, and Luna at his feet. For the first time in months, the place didn't feel empty. Ryan leaned back in the old armchair, the warmth of the dogs around him grounding him more than any badge or rule ever had. "Looks like it's just us now," he said quietly. Rex lifted his head, eyes reflecting the firelight, and gave a soft bark in reply. Outside, the snow kept falling, but for once, the world inside was still. The wind howled across the frozen plains of Pine Valley, carrying with it the sting of snow and the echo of distant thunder. Midnight cloaked the forest in silver and shadow. Ryan Callahan crouched behind the broken wall of an abandoned freight warehouse, his breath forming white clouds that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The glow from his flashlight was dimmed, wrapped in red cellophane to avoid detection. Beside him, Rex crouched low, muscles taut under his sable and black fur, ears flicking at every sound. Luna and Finn waited a few yards away near the collapsed loading ramp, eyes glinting in the darkness like silent sentinels. The tip they had received was clear. Victor Kane was moving what remained of his weapons cache out of Pine Valley tonight. It was the perfect chance to end this, for good. Ryan checked his watch, 11:43 p.m. The snowstorm would cover their tracks, but it also meant backup would take time to arrive. He knew he couldn't wait. A shadow moved between the stacked crates inside the warehouse. Ryan raised his binoculars. Through the frosted glass of a broken window, he caught sight of Victor Kane. The man was dressed in a long black overcoat lined with fur, his silver-streaked hair slicked back, and the arrogance on his face unshaken despite the chaos closing in around him. 3 men worked nearby, loading wooden crates into a pickup truck. Their weapons gleamed under the dim yellow light. Ryan whispered into his radio, "Unit 23 in position. Target confirmed. Waiting for signal." Static answered him. The storm had swallowed the transmission. He cursed under his breath. "Looks like it's just us, partner." Rex gave a low growl in response. Ryan patted his neck softly. "Let's move." They advanced through the snow, keeping low. Luna and Finn flanked wide, their paw prints vanishing instantly beneath the falling snow. Every crunch of ice sounded like thunder in the silence. Ryan reached the outer door, his gloved hand tightening on the handle. He pushed it open an inch, letting the metal hinge groan softly. Inside, the air was thick with oil and dust. The men were still talking. One joked about the sheriff losing his nerve again. Ryan's stomach twisted. Harold's betrayal had been only the beginning. The rot ran deeper. He raised his Glock, signaling Rex forward. The shepherd crept silently along the side wall, tail low, eyes focused. Ryan took aim. Then, suddenly, metal clattered. A loose wrench, knocked over by Finn's tail, hit the concrete floor and spun loudly. The echo shattered the silence. "Who's there?" one of the men shouted, swinging his flashlight toward the door. Ryan had no choice. "Move!" he barked, bursting through the doorway. Gunfire erupted instantly. Bullets ricocheted off metal beams, sparks flying like angry fireflies. Ryan dropped behind a crate, returning 2 precise shots. One assailant fell, his rifle clattering away. Rex lunged forward, teeth bared, tackling a second man before he could aim. The struggle was fierce. The man screamed, trying to shove the massive dog off him, but Rex was faster, pinning him with raw strength. Ryan advanced deeper into the warehouse, the scent of gunpowder burning his lungs. Through the smoke, he saw Victor retreating toward the far exit, shouting into his phone. "Ryan Callahan!" Victor's voice echoed through the chaos. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" Ryan's boots splashed through puddles of melted snow as he moved closer. "You're done, Kane. No one's coming to save you this time." Victor laughed darkly. "You think this ends here? You'll die in the same snow I found Brooks dying in." At the mention of Daniel's name, Ryan's pulse spiked. He turned just in time to see movement on the mezzanine above, a man aiming down at him from the rafters. Ryan dove sideways as the gunshot exploded, shattering wood beside his head. Before the shooter could fire again, Rex broke from cover with a savage snarl, leaping up the stacked crates. The dog slammed into the man's legs, sending both crashing onto the floor below. Ryan rolled, came up on one knee, and aimed. But Rex was already on top of the attacker, jaws clamped on his wrist until the gun fell away. The man screamed, kicking wildly. Ryan grabbed the weapon, kicked it aside, and shouted, "Rex, off!" The dog obeyed instantly, panting hard but unhurt. For a heartbeat, there was silence, then a new sound, tires crunching outside. Headlights cut through the cracks in the wall. A black SUV pulled up, and two more armed men spilled out. Ryan swore under his breath, reloading. The snowstorm was now a white curtain, visibility dropping by the second. "Finn! Luna! Guard!" he ordered, motioning toward the entrance. The two dogs took position, growling low as the men approached. The firefight reignited. Muzzle flashes illuminated the swirling snow. Ryan moved between cover, methodical, relentless. His shots were measured. 2 men down, 1 wounded. But Victor had vanished again. Then, a familiar voice cut through the storm. "Ryan!" It was Daniel Brooks. He stumbled out from behind a stack of barrels, wearing a hospital coat under a borrowed parka. His face was pale, but determined. "He's running for the back exit!" Ryan blinked, disbelief flashing across his face. "What the hell are you doing here?" Daniel's breath came in ragged gasps. "I had to make it right. I'm done running." Before Ryan could respond, another gunshot rang out. A bullet tore through a crate near Daniel's head, splintering wood. "Get down!" Ryan shouted, firing back. From the shadows near the back door, Victor emerged, a pistol raised. His face was twisted with rage. "You should have stayed buried, Brooks!" he roared, firing again. The shot missed by inches. Daniel ducked behind a beam, clutching his shoulder. Rex bolted forward, bounding across the floor. In a blur, he tackled Victor's arm just as the gun fired again. The weapon flew from Victor's grip, skidding across the floor. The two struggled, man against beast. Rex's teeth locked on Victor's coat sleeve. Ryan sprinted forward, slamming into Victor, driving him against the wall. The impact knocked the air from both their lungs. Snow blew through the open doorway as they fought, boots slipping on the icy concrete. Victor threw a punch, catching Ryan's jaw. Ryan staggered, recovered, and drove his fist into Victor's ribs. They grappled until Rex lunged again, knocking Victor off balance. Ryan pressed the barrel of his gun to Victor's chest. "It's over!" Victor spat blood, sneering. "You think this changes anything?" Ryan tightened his grip. "No, but it ends you." Victor's hand twitched toward his pocket. Ryan saw the glint of steel, a hidden knife. Before he could react, Rex was already moving. The shepherd lunged, teeth clamping onto Victor's wrist, tearing the blade away. Victor screamed, collapsing to his knees. Ryan kicked the knife aside, cuffing him with one swift motion. "You're under arrest for arms trafficking, attempted murder, and conspiracy against federal law." Victor struggled once more, then froze as Rex's low growl rumbled inches from his throat. The distant wail of sirens finally broke through the storm. Reinforcements, late but coming. Ryan exhaled slowly, the adrenaline fading from his veins. He looked over at Daniel, who leaned against a crate, clutching his shoulder, but still on his feet. "You did good," Ryan said softly. Daniel nodded weakly. "Guess it's time the truth spoke louder than fear." Rex trotted over and pressed his head against Ryan's leg, chest rising and falling from exhaustion. Ryan knelt and scratched behind his ear, voice thick with pride. "Good boy, Rex. You saved us all tonight." The warehouse filled with the flashing red and blue of arriving patrol cars. Snow drifted in through the open doors, settling over the fallen weapons and shattered crates, like the world itself was trying to bury the last traces of darkness. For the first time in months, Ryan felt the weight on his shoulders begin to lift. Justice had finally taken shape in the blizzard. Morning sunlight poured through the high courtroom windows of Jefferson County Courthouse, cutting through the dust and cold air like warm blades of gold. Outside, the last of the winter snow was melting into streams along the sidewalks, the sound of water dripping from the rooftops a quiet hymn of renewal. Inside, the air carried tension, the final echoes of a long fight nearing its end. Deputy Ryan Callahan sat straight in his uniform at the witness bench, his posture calm but his eyes sharp. Months of sleepless nights had carved faint lines around them, but the weight of justice finally felt close. Across the courtroom sat Victor Kane, hands cuffed, wearing a tailored gray suit that hung slightly loose after weeks in custody. His once slick hair was unkempt, the arrogance that had defined him gone, replaced by a hollow calm, the kind that only comes when a man knows his empire is over. Beside him, Deputy Harold Reeves, pale and nervous, avoided Ryan's gaze entirely. His uniform had been stripped. He now wore county inmate orange, his face beaded with sweat despite the chill. Judge Marjorie Ellis, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pinned neatly in a bun, presided over the case. She had spent decades on the bench, known for her no-nonsense demeanor and the deep compassion hidden beneath it. She adjusted her glasses and looked over the papers before her. "The evidence presented," she said, voice steady, "clearly shows a conspiracy that endangered lives across multiple states. Mr. Kane, your operation trafficked illegal weapons, manipulated law enforcement, and resulted in the deaths of at least 4 individuals. Mr. Reeves, you used your badge to protect that operation." Her gaze hardened. This court sentences Victor Kane to 35 years in federal prison without parole. Harold Reeves, 15 years for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The sound of the gavel cracked through the silence like thunder. Victor's expression didn't change. He only leaned slightly toward Ryan as he was led away and murmured, "You think you've cleaned the world, Deputy? There's always another storm." Ryan met his eyes coolly. "Then I'll be there for the next one, too." The bailiffs escorted both men out, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. For the first time since the frozen night in the forest, the air around Ryan felt lighter. Across the courtroom, Daniel Brooks sat at the witness table, a faint scar still visible on his cheek. He wore a simple gray suit provided by the court and looked healthier than Ryan had ever seen him. When the judge turned her attention to him, her tone softened. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "your cooperation and testimony were crucial in dismantling this network. While your prior actions placed you in dangerous company, your courage in coming forward will be noted." Daniel nodded, his voice steady. "I don't deserve a clean slate, Your Honor, but I'll take whatever chance I'm given to start over." Judge Ellis offered a rare, faint smile. "Then make it count." After the proceedings, Ryan caught up with Daniel outside the courthouse. The snow had turned to rain, washing the streets in silver reflections. Daniel extended his hand. "You saved my life more than once, Callahan. I won't waste what you did." Ryan shook it firmly. "Just live right, Brooks. That's all the thanks I need." As Daniel walked away toward a transport van that would take him to a halfway house in Denver, Rex stood by Ryan's side, tail swaying lightly. The dog's gaze followed Daniel until he disappeared. Ryan knelt down, resting a gloved hand on the shepherd's back. "He's got his road," Ryan murmured. "We've got ours." The road ahead came sooner than expected. 2 weeks later, inside the Pine Valley Sheriff's Office, a small ceremony was held. The department's main hall had been cleared, a banner reading "Service and Valor Recognition" hanging above the podium. Officers and town locals filled the room, their chatter blending with the creak of the old wooden floorboards. Sheriff Darnell Graves, now visibly prouder and a bit leaner after the department's reforms, stood at the podium. He looked around the crowd before his voice boomed through the microphone. Tonight, we honor those who stood when others ran, who believed in justice even when it came at a cost. Deputy Callahan, step forward." Ryan approached, his dark navy uniform crisp, the gold badge on his chest gleaming under the warm light. Rex walked beside him, leash loose, moving with quiet confidence. The sheriff smiled as he handed Ryan a polished plaque. "For bravery, integrity, and unshakable faith in the law. And for one more hero in this room, Rex, who saved lives when no one else could." The crowd broke into applause. A few of the officers whistled softly, and someone even shouted, "Good boy, Rex." Ryan chuckled as Rex lifted his head proudly, tongue lolling slightly. The German shepherd sat tall beside his handler, eyes bright and alert, not with the wild fear of their first meeting, but with steady purpose. After the ceremony, Ryan stepped outside into the courtyard. The air smelled of damp pine and spring thaw. The sky was painted in soft gold, the sun dipping behind the hills. He loosened Rex's leash, letting the dog trot freely around the yard. Luna and Finn were already there, playing with two children, a brother and sister from a local farming family who had adopted them. The boy threw a stick, and Luna bounded after it, tail wagging furiously. Finn rolled on the grass, paws waving in the air. Ryan smiled at the sight. Looks like they found their new pack. He sat on the steps, watching Rex return to his side and sit close. The shepherd rested his head on Ryan's knee, sighing softly, content. Ryan ran his hand through Rex's fur, voice quiet but full of meaning. "You've come a long way, haven't you? From the snow, the blood, the cages, to this. We both got lucky." Rex looked up, brown eyes reflecting the light of the setting sun. Ryan continued, his voice almost a whisper. "Maybe it wasn't luck. Maybe it was grace. We both got a second chance, God's way of saying there's still good left in this world." The bell tower across the square chimed 6 times, each note carrying through the crisp evening air. Townsfolk were lighting lanterns for the spring festival, laughter rising with the scent of food and pine smoke. Ryan stood, glancing down at his partner. "Come on, Rex. Let's go home." As they walked down the quiet street toward his truck, the last of the snow melted underfoot. The air no longer bit, it breathed. From a distance, the faint sound of children's laughter carried through the twilight, mingling with the rustle of wind through the trees. Rex trotted ahead, tail high, ears perked, while Ryan followed, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He glanced once more toward the courthouse on the hill. Justice had been served. The past was buried beneath the snow, and for the first time in a long time, Pine Valley felt like a place that could begin again. As they reached the patrol SUV, Rex jumped into the passenger seat with practiced ease. Ryan smiled, starting the engine. "All right, partner. Time to patrol this new season." The truck rolled out of the lot, headlights cutting through the dusk, toward a horizon no longer shadowed by guilt or fear. Only hope. Sometimes God sends angels not with wings but with fur and faithful hearts. Rex was more than a dog. He was a reminder that even in the darkest storms, loyalty, courage, and love can guide us home. Through him, Ryan found redemption, and a town found its faith again. Perhaps that's how God works. Through small miracles, through second chances, through a heartbeat that never gives up on us. In our everyday lives, we may not wear a badge or fight against evil, but we can all choose kindness, protect the helpless, and believe that hope is never too far away. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and type Amen. If you believe that God still works through love, through loyalty, and through the quiet courage of those who never stop caring. May God bless you and every soul who believes that even one act of compassion can change the world. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, love, and second chances.